My theorist's name was Burris Frederick Skinner. He was a well-known American psychologist who developed multiple theories that were very influential. His life began in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania in 1904. Skinner was born into a family that was better than average. His father was a lawyer, and his mother was a stay-at-home mom who took care of the family. His comfortable upbringing gave him the ability to explore his interests and he was encouraged by his parents instead of having to work to help support his family, like so many other children he grew up with. Um, the time period that Skinner was born into was the time of the Revolution of the United States. The country was in the middle of the Second Industrial Revolution, and big things were happening. Less than a year before Skinner was born, Ford Motor Company was formed and assembly lines were coming into existence. Air travel flight was also being pioneered, thanks to Wright brothers making for the first powered aircraft. Um, if Skinner were born 100 years before this, or after, his life would be completely different. From a young age, Skinner showed curiosity towards building gadgets and contraptions, which most likely resulted in surrounding this era. Um, Later in his life, during college years, he invented the Skinner box. Um, it was a chamber that led to this theorist's behavior. Another significant event taking place during his lifetime was the First World War. America entered the World War while Skinner was in his adolescent years. Life in the United States was strongly impacted by war, socially, politically, and economically. Upon the wars end, American citizens were experiencing and participating in labor strikes, fearing the rise of communism, and entering a time of prohibition and women's suffrage. As Skinner's entered his early 20s, the United States entered the Great Depression. Um, as the Great Depression neared the end, the world found itself in another major war, the Second World War. All of these events, along with so many others, led Skinner to living in a very unique society, and this he was a well-known behaviorist and spent a large portion of his life studying the area of psychology. The study of behaviorism is the analyzing of observable aspects in individuals, such as human emotions and motives. The behavioral theory that Skinner developed was that humans' behavior is determined strongly by consequences, reinforcements, and punishments. But by looking at the area where Skinner grew up observing that was happening in America, it is clear that his ideas could have been strongly influenced by that time. Skinner's beliefs about religion were influenced probably by the events that were happening during this time, and also because his grandmother embedded spiritual torture into his head. His grandmother would show him the coal fire and the heating stove and tell Skinner that the children who tell lies will be thrown in a place like the heating stove with burning coal and they will die. This had a huge role on his beliefs because he was terrified, and he asked his father if he took him to a magic show and there was the appearance of the devil, and he asked his father if that was what hell was like, and he said yes, and he never recovered from that. A lot of Skinner's thinking was influenced by the view that he had about God. And his view of God was that he was punishing. He never really overcame that fear of God, who God was. And Skinner had the desire to propose a good utopian world, which reflected on him making his most famous works called Walden 2. His denial and mistrust of religion influenced him to imagine this perfect world that he wanted to have, but he couldn't because of his fear of God, because he thought that he was a punishing God. His philosophy of this utopian world was to correct like all the problems that he felt were created by religion. To understand B.F. Skinner's ideas and theories is important because this is the world where he grew up. Skinner lived through a time when there was so much happening in America and across the world, which led to his interest in how environmental experience caused behaviors in individuals. So if Skinner had been born into a different time or a different family or any different circumstances, he may have not been influenced by in the ways that he was, and his ideas and theories of on behaviorism that are still considered today may not have been formed because of the things that he saw and went through. Skinner was one of the most influential psychologists, and he is a great person to do research on. His theories were really interesting when you look deep into them, and I encourage you guys to look at them and dig and research more about him, because he had a lot of stuff going on in his life during this time, and I think that had a huge effect on what he believed and what he did and what he made, which is super important. Thanks for listening.